talk some LSU football recruiting here in the next segment. Sonny Shipp from 24/7 Sports, good enough to give us a little bit of time on this Monday. Joins us on the Jim's Firearms Hotline. Sonny, how are you?
I'm doing good, man. I ain't as good as you, though. Big comment at Super Bowl Radio Row.
This is pretty cool, I'll say. We have not done this as a station before, but obviously with the game right down the road, we had an opportunity to do so. There's some fairly high-profile organizations here on set. Little old 104.5, we're over here in our spot, but it's really cool to see, and I'm excited to get the week rolling here. LSU had a big weekend on campus with a junior day, which included some younger players than juniors, but I think it appears that it was pretty well attended. Give us a feeling about 50 folks on hand as far as prospects go, Sonny.
Yeah, and they also were able to get a large portion of the top 10 in Louisiana on campus too. So that really came to that was really good. And the name of the event was Boys from the Boot, which, obviously puts an emphasis on the Louisiana kids. And when you look at 2026 in this state, it's pretty top-heavy. You know, guys like Lamar Brown was on campus, Blaine Bradford, the safety out of Catholic High, Jabari Mack, the wide receiver out of Destrehan, he was on campus. All of your commitments were there, and we can really say that after Jaraylin McCroy decommitted today, the Mississippi defensive lineman. And so they had all 5 Louisiana guys who were committed were there. So really, when you look at it, I think it was pretty successful.
So tell me about the decommitment earlier from today when you don't show up on campus and instead you go visit an SEC rival and then that recruitment opens up about 20 hours later. I kind of feel like the writing's probably on the wall. But tell us about the decommitment from earlier today and what that means.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, man. You know, Jaraylin McCroy, he showed up. He's around 6'5", 245, 250, maybe a little bit more than that. But he showed up at LSU's camp, the Brian Kelly's first summer in Baton Rouge. He showed up as a freshman. Everybody's looking at this kid like, oh my God, who is this guy? You know, I mean, he looked like a Greek god. You just don't see freshmen drawn up that way. And unfortunately, though, that was his best moment, because since then he's just continued to slide. And I think that he's a guy that you're going to see eventually slide out of that 4-star rating that he has right now. And look, if there's a position that you feel great about in Louisiana right now for the 2026 class, it's the defensive line, because you've got Lamar Brown, who basically, if everything goes the way it's trending right now, he's going to play on the defensive line at defensive end when if he signs with LSU. And the defensive line class is really, really loaded in the state. You've got Richard Anderson, the defensive tackle out of Carr, who is already committed. You've got Dylan Berryman, the big 4-star defensive tackle out of Wassman up around the Monroe area. And you've got some more really talented linemen in this state. And so, I think at the end of the day, fans are going to look back at this and say, okay, who was the guy from Mississippi who decommitted early in the process?
It's interesting that you mentioned Lamar Brown, because he obviously can play both ways for U-High, and depending on what service you may look at, you may see him on the offensive side or the defensive side of the ball. Has that decision in your mind already been made, and kind of has he expressed an interest? What is the coaching staff saying? How do they want to handle the big young man?
You know, he was torn in the beginning of the process. He was kind of torn, and we've got him he's a 5-star pretty much across the board, regardless of which service you look at. And he was, in my opinion, he was equally as talented on either side of the ball when you saw him as a sophomore. I think, as his sophomore year turned into him preparing for his junior year, his focus started to shift more to wanting to play defense. And he told us that his conversations with Bo Davis and Kevin Peoples over the weekend was about defense, was about him coming in as a defensive end, kind of opposite of that speed defensive end, like you saw with Braden with Braden Swinson last year, Brown would kind of fit more of that Savion Jones mold. And, that's the direction that he's leaning right now. And if you're LSU, and look, quite frankly, if you're any college coach, you say, I don't know, man, we kind of like you on the offensive side of the ball. Well, you're an idiot. I mean, you're an absolute idiot. You get that kid on campus, you let him play wherever he wants, and you just focus on getting him. I mean, he is that type of guy. And it's not that often that we've seen guys like that in the past. Look, Morris Claiborne came in as not knowing if he was going to play offense or defense. He's just one of an example that we've seen in the past. And I think Lamar Brown is really unique in the athletic frame that he has and his skill set, and that I think he's a 5-star on either side of the ball, and you don't really see that with a whole lot of guys his size.
Yeah, you think about Corey Webster wanting to play both sides of the ball. Marcus Spears was the tight end who they moved to the other side of the ball
Spears,
as well.
Right, exactly. I forgot that. I forgot about that.
Kind of thing happens. I'm sitting next to Jacob Hester right here. They sent it safety. I think it was 2 practices, so maybe you can play offense now, Jake. But it's just you get those athletes and you figure it out once they get to campus. I'm with you. Let's talk about Blaine Bradford. Obviously, got an older brother in the purple and gold, big-time safety recruit, top 5 by just about everybody at that spot at Catholic High School. How do you think LSU sits for him?
I think LSU sat in a good spot entering the weekend. After Junior Day after the event was over, he spent some extra time with DJ Pickett, the 5-star cornerback who got to campus in late December from the 2025 class. Took part in the bowl game practices and stuff. And I think that's good when you can hook him up with another guy of who went through a lot of the stuff that Blaine is going to go through. Being a 5-star, being one of the best in the country at his position, going to get a ton of already has a ton of offers, going to get a ton of NIL offers, and so being able to hook him up with someone of that stature, and that they can kind of swap stories and just share experiences, I think is good. And I think something else that's good is that, and this is not a knock on Jake Olson by any means, he's a young up and coming position coach is how I look at Jake. And when you're talking about keeping one of the top players in the country in your backyard at home, I think you just, you want to have a little bit of reassurance. You want someone who's got a lot more skins on the wall being involved in that recruitment. And that's something that Frank Wilson has done. Frank Wilson's gotten more heavily involved with Blaine Bradford. So I think you'll see him, Jake Olson, and Blake Baker kind of tag team that recruitment going forward. But one interesting thing that I go back to a 7-on-7 tournament last spring. Jacob wasn't committed he wasn't committed to Houston at the time. Blaine obviously wasn't committed anywhere. And I asked him, like, hey, what's y'all's thoughts? Like, do y'all talk about playing together? Is that something you really want to do? And at the time, Blaine said, no, we're gonna do our own thing, and we're gonna go on our own paths, and if those paths happen to end up at the same place, then that's fine. So I don't think you look at Blaine Bradford and say, oh, well, his brother's Jacob. Jacob is at LSU. He wants to stay home and play with him. I do think that scenario is going to work out, but it's not going to be just because they want to play together.
This is a tougher question to answer. I kind of just want some general thoughts on, but we've all seen in following recruiting over the years those really special classes in Louisiana that are, maybe 4 or 5 that are just superstars, and then they're more like 11, 12, 13 deep, and those guys kind of form a relationship at camps and form a relationship going to games on the weekends, and they kind of become a big package deal. No more, prominent example of that than the 2011 crew that was labeled the Fam and whatnot. Do you get the sense, I realize this is a really talented group, that there are some good relationships that could work in LSU's favor over the next 10 months?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that 2011 group, because when you said that, that's immediately what I started thinking of. You had Lael Collins, Anthony Johnson, Jeremy Hill, Kenny Hilliard,
Freak Johnson.
And
Trey Turner.
Trey Turner, Jonah Austin out of St. Aug. That was one of those classes. I do think that, I think when you look at this 2026 class, I think you have all the makings of a group like that, especially when you've got, Lamar Brown and Blaine Bradford, they're both in Baton Rouge. There's not much, there's not much distance between where they're both residing. So you have that on your side. You also have Elijah Haven, the number 1 prospect in the country for 2027. He's in Baton Rouge. He's in your backyard too. So you really have a lot of the ingredients to to developing those relationships. I think you'll see those relationships get a lot stronger as time goes on, particularly when they end up at other campuses for junior days or for visits. You've got summer camps coming over the summer. You'll have official visits that'll be starting up in May. And so, yeah, you have a lot of those ingredients right there. And, and I'll even go a step further and say, you kind of had some of those things in 2014. Granted, Speedy Noel ended up going to Texas A&M. We know about we know about Gerald, and it's kind of remember, like, okay, who did he originally commit to? Was it Florida or Miami? But it was Florida. You had Trey Quinn, who ended up in Baton Rouge, obviously Leonard Fournette. So, I think that this 2026 class is going to take more of is going to trend more towards that 2011 group, to where they all, most of them all stayed home. And I don't think you're going to have those defections like you had with Speedy Noel and with Gerald Willis. And then we got to remember, Jakeem Stewart reclassified to 2025.
Right.
So if he would have stayed in 2026, I mean, just think about how top-heavy Louisiana would be then.
That's crazy to think about. If we move 1 year forward to 2027, this kind of put a smile on my face as a basketball guy. Rustin's Ahmad Hudson, the son of former LSU basketball standout Antonio Hudson, who was a great player for LSU in the early 2000s. He's a really, really highly thought of high school tight end in the 2027 class that was on campus, tweeted out a picture from Junior Day. What can you tell us about Ahmad Hudson?
Yeah, I think LSU's in a really strong spot there. I think we're going to see him I think we're going to see him he could potentially take a similar path like we see with Trey'Dez Green. Once football season's over, you jump onto the hardwood and you do it there. I guess my biggest, I think the only, if there is a negative that came out of the weekend, it's like, why couldn't the LSU coaches keep him out of the PMAC? Let's keep the momentum going from Boys from the Boot, and not make him have to go watch Texas skull crush LSU.
Yeah, I talked about that in the last segment, unfortunately, and that just wasn't great. But yeah, your point is well made. Just keep him over there in the football facility for right now. Last one, another 2027 player, Jaden Miles, a running back there that Frank Wilson had on campus and extended an offer to. What can you tell us about Jaden Miles?
Yeah, I tell you what, when you go back, and this is not a knock on Clyde Edwards-Helaire at all, because, I mean, he had a fantastic career at LSU. He had a good career at Catholic High. But I think Jaden Miles is probably going to be the best pure running back, not obviously taking Clyde's versatility out of the equation. But when you just look at the running back, I think he's going to probably be the best one to come out of Catholic High since Darius Geis. He's a big kid. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Jeremy Hill. As far as his stature goes, his how big he is, kind of how fast he is, and to extend that offer, I think was really big to come in person from Frank Wilson. You can, when you've got a Catholic High kid who can play like that, you need to get that offer out ASAP. Yeah. And I'm glad that LSU didn't wait until they saw him in the spring or they saw him during the summer. They also dished out, surprisingly, Corey Raymond went into this weekend without an offer extended to a Louisiana cornerback for the 2026 class. And he did offer one. He played quarterback out of Winsboro as a junior, and that's probably the position he's going to play a lot in 2026, but LSU offered him as a cornerback. Tall kid, 6'2", 170, 175, really fits that mold of Corey Raymond, and you guys might be able to help me with this. I'm trying to think. I think the last kid who really came out of Winsboro with LSU might have been Booger McFarland.
Yeah, I can't think of one. I've been through Winsboro a number of times back in a former life, but I can't recall another one since Booger. So yeah, I mean that one worked out okay. It just took another 30 years to get another one in.
Hey, yeah, maybe the next one will only take 15, right?
There you go, Sonny. We appreciate some time, man.
Absolutely, man. Y'all have a great day, fellas.
Sure will. Sonny Shipp with 24/7 Sports talking about LSU's Junior Day. Boys from the Boot back over the weekend. Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.